Hello, my V family. It is once again my honor to be hosting this program with a great man. I would like to welcome to this program the founder of the QI Group of Companies, the lead bird of the V, a great philanthropist, our mentor, Dato Sri Vijay Ishwaran. Happy New Year. Happy Chinese New Year, Dato Sri.
Kong Si Fa Chai. To all our IRs who celebrate the new year, we're welcoming the year of the dog this year, and this is going to be the best year ever yet. So, to everyone there, once again, Happy Chinese New Year. Kong Si Fa Chai.
Dato Sri, some of us have heard you over the past many years talk about a concept called confront before conflict. Yet many of us still do not fully understand this concept. Would you mind explaining this concept to us all, Dato Sri?
Well, in my mind, particularly here in Asia, one of the biggest problems that we have and always have had is simply the fact that we do not say what we actually feel. And more often than not, these things keep adding up. And inevitably, the end of that road is that it explodes. And it usually does when we are least expecting it. It's unfortunate because, in reality, the simplest thing to do would be to say what you feel instantly. Um, there are times, of course, that you might want to avoid something sensitive or something that requires you to be diplomatic and so on. Fine. But at the earliest opportunity, you need to go back and clarify. To leave something basically unsaid or untouched or unclear in somebody's mind for any length of time, it's like leaving a seed. It will eventually grow. And before it becomes a weed, and eventually, into a tree, you need to basically pull it out.
Okay. Dato Sri, I know that there are certain rules that you've mentioned about confrontation. Would you mind talking about these rules?
Well, I'm not going to go through the 10 rules that I have on confrontation because they're going to be easily available out there. But I will touch on it very simply. In essence, it begins with the simple concept of packing your emotions at the door, number one. Never confront or argue a case from an emotional standpoint. Number two, put yourself in the other person's shoe. Always remember, to address the issue, not the person. And this requires you to basically be a little detached from the entire proceedings. You know, and I guess the third more important thing is to constantly remember that the purpose of communication is to find a solution, not to analyze the problem. All right. So if you're going to go down the road of doing a post-mortem, that's not going to lead you to a solution moving down the road. So you actually need to focus on getting solutions at the end of the day.
Okay.
All right. So this is, in essence, the key to confrontation.
Okay. Dato Sri, earlier you talked about the situation here in Asia where people are less likely to confront.
Yeah.
I grew up in such a culture where it was not comfortable for people to actually confront others, especially when they were getting upset about something. Would you recommend a certain way for us to be able to learn how to confront people in a way that makes it less difficult?
Well, I think the important thing to recognize is confrontation is not necessarily hostile. For instance, I was recently in Melbourne and I was talking to a professor of medicine, all right, and who was teaching students at the University of Melbourne, and I we shared some of the experiences we have had, me in my teaching years and what he's having right now. He says, his Asian students have a difficulty, in asking questions.
Exactly.
So, he keeps telling them, especially when they're doing the rounds with him. They sit there observing, taking notes. Every word the patient says, they are writing it 20 times. But in actual fact, you see, sadly, it's the Western students who are asking the questions. So he has always provoked them, prod them to say, this is your patient. You're not going to get anything out of him by telepathy. You're going to have to ask a question. You need to dig, to provoke. And the same thing that can be said, I would imagine in the arena of law. I mean, having a polite lawyer is a waste of time.
Right.
All right. So you're going to need somebody who's going to go out there and throw his heart into it and fight for you. In the arena of networking, this doesn't need to be said. You have to be able to, instill, instigate, invoke. These are things you have to be able to do. And that requires you to confront, to speak. Now, yes, I have always had this problem. When even when I'm training right now in networking, in the States, when I go up there and hardly before I finish my session, they'll already be throwing up the questions to ask questions. I mean, throwing up their hands to ask questions. They don't even give me a breathing space. And if I were to even make the mistake of saying questions, I'll get inundated. And here, I have to provoke them to ask questions. Now, you know, perhaps this comes from the culture, perhaps it comes from our upbringing, so on and so forth. But I'd like to basically make a concerted effort to change that. But I do also believe that is changing, because take our kids, for instance, the millennials. They are going to be different. They're going to have no problem confronting, I can tell you. So I can already see that happening, as we grow. Now, it's the more of the old timers, people of our generation, that we have to change. But having said that, the Western style of confrontation can be a little bit caustic.
Okay.
Okay, it can rub your edges. It can be a little bit drastic. I believe that keeping politeness in the forefront is always critical. So the key factor of confrontation is address the issue, never the person.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Dr. On a different note, Dr. there was something that I learned from you back in 1998. It was what you called TAPS, or the Truth Application Program or Protocol. Could you please tell us about this, Dr.
Well, initially it was truth application protocol, and when we started applying it in the form of a training program, it became truth application program. But TAPS initially was about getting people to confront. All right, it is the backbone of building a network. You see, ultimately, what is the concept of confrontation all about? It's not that you need to confront people for the sake of confronting them. It's not a science; it's an art. And the reason why it is there is simply because you need to have more truth in your relationship. And the more you confront people, the more likely the truth actually emerges. People are capable of carrying a false image of themselves. They even actually start to believe this false image. It's called believing your own hype. The Americans call it believing your own hype. It's a reality. If you say it enough times, you actually start to believe it. Now, what you need to do sometimes is to get to the heart of the matter, the truth of the matter, to actually see yourself. Now, we see a mirror every day. I mean, we need to, every time we glance at it, we are combing our hair, adjusting, the tie, adjusting the way we look. A mirror is become a very necessary part of, our living day to day. 100 years ago, 120 years ago, there were no mirrors. If you take a look at the mirrors that come back from the 1870s, 1890s, whatever it is, they give you a face that blows your mind away. It's like they use everything from cooking pans to looking at well water or something like that to look at the face. Mirrors actually came into being very gradually into the 20th century. So now we are also used to it. But for 1,000 years before that, we only got to know how we look by getting someone to help you. For thousands of years before that, or you go and look, because you need to find water.
Hmm.
All right.
Right.
Now, the same thing is required for us to see ourselves inside, as in terms of our persona, our mentality, how are we to another person, the real you, as it were, not the physical person, but the person that interacts with everyone. Are you with me?
Yes.
Now that you can't see, you see, so we need a mirror, and the best possible mirror for me is a two-stage process. One is, I have this tradition of observing silence every day. In that silence, I make observations, and I make observations of myself. I actually try to be as detached as possible in analyzing what I've done yesterday. Look at my planning over the last week or so, moving forward, etc. So it is a kind of a mirror. But to help this, the second stage, I need the people around me. I need them to be my mirror. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in order for them to be able to be truthful with me, I need to be truthful with myself. So, TAPS is that process. TAPS is that process of bringing out that truth about yourself, creating that first baseline. So, people come up there and they throw out these statements at the beginning of TAPS, and these statements is what actually I unravel. So, I challenge them. I let them actually walk into their own trap. So, I have some standard questions as to, so what do you think, who you are, etc., so on and so forth. And the natural tendency of people is to be ego driven, and they make these grandiose statements, and then I pull the statements apart. And in a sense, I mean, without going through a full taps with you right now,
Yeah.
what I basically do is just get them to look at reality. People, as a rule, tend to overpromise and underdeliver.
True.
Are you with me?
Yes.
And if they can see that for a start, that they do this, they overpromise to a great scale and then underdeliver, then they will begin to start assessing and analyzing themselves. They will start to look for ground zero. And ground zero is where we need to be. We need to have our feet on the ground. TAPS is only that, bringing your feet on the ground.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sri. I've known you for 20 years, yet I think every time that you and I get to communicate, I learn something new. Truly appreciate this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another wonderful episode of In the Zone. I would like to thank you, Dr. Sri, once again. Looking forward to seeing you at the next episode of this program. Thank you very much.
Kong Si Fa Chai.
Thank you, Dr.